father and his daughter were having a sexual relationship, as long as they were over 18, you wouldn't be judgmental, you would allow them in your safe space? They're part of the
yeah.
LGBT community?
Yeah.
You retired too?
Not me. I'm in my prime.
Hey team, how we going? Happy New Year. It's Kaz from In the Trenches with Kaz, with our lovely panel with Lauren and Ed. Welcome to No Safe Spaces, where you can put the subjects that need to be covered, that are often ignored because of repercussions.
How dare you?
And we leave them on the table. So meet us in comments and let us know what you think. And maybe one day you're going to be the fourth position here. Starting us off today is going to be myself today, of the one of the three subjects. And I'll be talking about military enlistment. 17 years old. Is it too young? I believe it is. And I'm about to tell you why. So Ed, veteran, about to have a son, going straight into the military, in less than 2 weeks.
8 days.
How many?
Oh, wow.
8 days.
8 days.
8
Lauren
days.
has a sniper that lives out in the backyard,
Yeah.
and I'm a veteran too.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Guys and gals, from an instructor's point of view, from a father's point of view, from a soldier's point of view, and a veteran's point of view, 17, I'm telling you, is too young.
What I tell you, now go get me a juice box. You know who you're talking to. I'm talking to the juice box guy.
And you'll never get that answer from a 17-year-old while they're 17. But you will hear it from them when they're later in their careers, where they can make silly decisions, not necessarily just in the uniform, but we're handing them a whole vast amount of adult mentorship that is sometimes not always good as well, but is at least over the age of drinking, consent, adult voting, etc. As a 17-year-old, we're inviting them into an area that they shouldn't normally get in until they're 18. And it's not because of conscription. It's not because of emergency where we need numbers right now. It is the same reason that every calling kind of career starts around that age. They're taking advantage of your zest for life, your inability to slow down. They're actually giving you or taking your training wheels off before they're needed, and there is no requirement to do so. We're taking people with a one-track mind, too much energy and too much testosterone, and offering them the keys to the city without actually explaining, do they have the mental resilience to be able to make the decisions on the ground? Do they have credibility? Does their body have the scaffolding to be able to take the rigors of operations? And I'm not talking about just boot camp. I'm not talking about just infantry. I'm talking about the battalion, where you can have a 35-year-old man now competing in the same roles with a 17-year-old. There is no safe space. When you were 17, you were still expected to be able to come up to the plate.
Okay.
And that includes emotionally, maturity, okay, and responsibility. And we all know that's almost impossible. Okay, I think 17 is wrong. The fact that in Australia we still allow for 17-year-olds to enlist, despite the fact at a moment's notice their parents can withdraw consent and then pull them back out of their career based on one fuel-based conversation where they felt like they were doing it hard or didn't understand why they were learning what they're learning, when they're learning it, or even being told what to do with no ability to answer back. Discipline. It can be a magic story, and it is for many of the soldiers that work for me. But when you have 17-year-olds in your organization, I think it's too young. I don't think it's fair. And it just feels disingenuous. Why? What is the real reason you want a 17-year-old there when there's no demand to get people through the door? We're actually full. I don't know. I think this one's really close to you, Ed. And the thought of enlisting a 17-year-old soldier and potentially losing, and you can't go overseas until you're over 18 anyway.
That was the key point for me there, because I actually experienced part of this. in 2009 when I was deployed. I remember conferring with a counterpart of mine, 4th Platoon Sergeant. I was 2nd Platoon Sergeant, and we're sitting there talking, and he had mentioned one of his soldiers who wasn't there yet. And it caught me off guard. I'm like, what do you mean he ain't here yet? Where are you at? Because, getting out of a deployment was like, oh, there's no way you're going to get out of a deployment. So it's like, what do you mean he's didn't come over with us? And he's like, well, he couldn't deploy with us because he's not old enough.
And there's all of us, looking young, strong and clean, rocking slouch hats, slung SLRs and greens.
Didn't even dawn on me. I didn't even think about it, actually. I'm like, how old is he? He's like, oh, he's still only 17. He don't turn 18 until this date, so he won't even deploy here until this date. I'm like, I didn't even think of that. But on some of those points that you're bringing up on the 7th, I joined at 17. I joined the Ohio Army National Guard at the time. And then Desert Storm kicked off, and then I couldn't get out of the National Guard to go active, but I was in the National Guard. So obviously I wasn't able to get out of active or get into the active duty Army until 2 years later.
I was only 19.
Well, yeah, almost 2 years, a year and something. But honestly, age, while I've been in a unit, age hasn't really been something I've thought about or discussed or took much account with it. Any soldier that was under me or young soldiers in rank, privates, whether they were a 20-year-old private, 25-year-old private, or a 18-year-old private, to me, they were young in the lack of experience. So they were all treated the same in that aspect. Now, when giving tasks to those soldiers, I would notice that maybe I would tend to watch the younger ones a bit more, only because they didn't have the life experience to maybe fully understand all the words that I used or the intent that I meant.
Mum, Dad, and Denny saw the passing out parade at Puckapunyal. It was a long march from cadets.
Honestly, the only age that really got discussed or mentioned most was those guys that were the old guys. We'd always call them the grandpas, and crack jokes about the old guys, but never really paid too much attention to guys that were just young. It was just how does drinking rank thing.
I've done a lot of exchanges with the US. I know that there is such a close, we're talking about days difference between being 17 and 18 in Australia. And 17 in Australia, you can't drink, can't vote, can't do any of those things.
Can't get a
One
tattoo.
day later, you can drink and you've got it all. So it happens that quickly. But you've got people that are grown adults that now have a 17-year-old. What do we do with you? Are they performing a crime by saying, just come with us and have a few beers? But everything that happens after you've lit that fuse and given him that beer and said, welcome to the adult conversation, the adult is now responsible for the actions of someone with a subdeveloped frontal cortex.
Now here, of course, here's 21. So it's a little bit different.
So your soldiers can go on deployment from 18, 19, 20, 21, but they can't drink before 21.
Yep, absolutely. You can be a 19, 20-year-old private at your first duty station, been there a year and a half, and get busted for underage drinking.
Yeah.
However, in dealing with not being an NCO and having to go to the MP station and pick up young kids who've gotten arrested, to a point, I agree with the 21-year-old drinking age, because walking out the door at 18 years old, being in the Army and being away from home,
There's merit
make
to
some
that.
dumb mistakes at 18. So I don't mind 21 being it.
There's merit to that, but that's a completely different table talk. And I think that's one that people really appreciate, and anyone under 21 won't agree with, and everyone over 21 will agree with.
Yeah.
Maybe folks in comments can see if they want to hear more on this on our next roundtable.
Because I personally think people shouldn't be able to get tattoos before 21 either.
Yeah. So, Lauren, what's your thoughts? You've got a bunch of boys. You've got a sniper that lives in the backyard. What's your thought on, from a mother's perspective too?
Well, I think we just have to come back to, why don't we let 17-year-olds vote? Why don't we let 17-year-olds drink? And it's because they're not capable of making those decisions that will have consequences, or complex decisions, or abstract. It's because we've drawn a line in the sand there. So I really think it is too young. You know, they're babies still. They're just kids.
And you know, the only people who can get offended by this are people that are under 18 because they don't like
Yeah,
hearing it,
exactly. But
you know.
because I'm mature, I don't give a damn if they get offended.
Yeah, we're
Because
here
they
to
don't,
protect you
they
in the
haven't
absence of common
lived.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't lived what we have. And we're not saying it for fun. We're not saying it just to like pee on their parade. We're saying it because we've seen young people and maybe ourselves make terrible mistakes. And the thought of them making terrible mistakes in such a permanent, big international incident way is frightening.
And it's under our watch.
Yeah, exactly. It puts another layer of responsibility where you probably don't need it. You need people who are going to be responsible and able to process and make an abstract decision themselves.
Let's bookend that one and shut that one down. Now it's up to you in comments to let us know what your opinions are so we can revisit this as table talk, no subject kiboshed. Let's move on to first one to put their hand up gets a second subject. And 3, 2, 1, go. Lauren.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
Over to Lovely Lauren. You were so close, Ed, to not putting your hand up at all.
Yeah, you got to at least pretend.
Is a delay all the way over here in America.
Sure.
It's still 2020 over there.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an interesting subject that I actually haven't let either of you know about yet. I was looking through the news, and when you think of university students, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I tend to think then they're a little bit lazy, if I can say it.
Can you tell us what a safe space is?
I mean, a place where you're not going to get hurt or ridiculed.
You know, they're not. I know there's university students that have a couple of jobs and really go to every class and work really, really hard. But by and large, if I'm thinking of like a philosophy student or someone in the arts, I'm not generally thinking, wow, this person works really hard. Well, there is a university I'll just see if I can find it again. Yeah, there's a German university. Do you want me to show you the page?
Of course.
Okay. Here we've got, it's the Independent, and it says German University offering grants to people who want to do absolutely nothing. Researchers say project will help us discover how to step off life's hamster wheel. Okay, researchers in Germany are giving out scholarships in idleness and are willing to pay people to do as little as humanly possible. The University of Fine Arts, of course, nothing better. They've got too much money in their budget, I say, in Hamburg, is searching for exactly the right people to take part in a unique project examining laziness and lack of ambition. Applicants will have to convince the academics that they will be inactive in a particularly interesting way to win one of only 3 €1,600 scholarships available. The application form asks potential idlers both, what do you not want to do, and why is it important not to do this thing in particular? Professor Friedrich von Borries, who designed the project, he needs his tenure taken off him as far as I'm concerned, thinks it is important to study laziness more closely to help bring about an eco-social transformation. It is about exiting the constant success spiral.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Getting off life's hamster wheel. Applicants from across Germany are invited to submit their pictures on their plans for active inactivity. If we want to live in a society that consumes less energy, wastes fewer resources, this is not the right system of values, von Borries said. So this is actually got to do with the environment. It's not to say how do we stop people being idle, it's how do we be more like them. What do you think?
Well, laziness normally comes with low IQ, or inability or low ambition. So you're going to naturally have that. There has to be a counter to that. And if you drink from that poison chalice, that you're not allowed to vote for starters. They don't deserve to vote. Okay. And if you take that poison chalice, we better not see you outside your house. There has to be a reward that we get for the reward that you get, which is not a reward, it's a goddamn curse. And as far as for the betterment of the world, let's just, while we're in no safe spaces, say China, India, Pakistan, start doing a better job of cleaning up your filth before the rest of the world has to get on board and meet
Exactly.
you halfway.
That's a really great point. They talk about getting off life's hamster wheel. Well, sorry, we have to have a hamster wheel. We have to have people take out the garbage. We have to have people create stuff. We like to consume. We have to have people to be nurses and doctors and police and soldiers. So, I get offended as sometimes people think creative people are lazy, and that is not true. I could sit around thinking about being creative all day, but it is actually putting that creation into manifestation and working and seeing a plan through to fruition is what makes it. It's work.
Well, the human race is very similar to a shark. It has to keep moving.
Yep, exactly.
Or it'll fall apart. But we've got less and less people now that are on the hamster wheel, which means they've got to run faster to compensate for those
carry everyone else.
Compensate to the food on the table.
Yep. What do you think, Ed?
I don't understand how you have to try to find people in university
Yeah.
if you're lazy. I would think that if you wanted to study laziness as a university professor, simply open your eyes and look at your classroom.
Yep.
Not saying that just college kids are just lazy, meaning, well, I think most kids that age nowadays, at least from my point of view, are lazy.
Yep.
If they aren't doing something that they absolutely have to do, they're not doing something productive. They're sitting around on their keister, surfing some sort of social media or playing a video game, and that's it. They're not extending themselves to groups of people or to organizations or to clubs. And when I say that, I'm sure that there's the one or two go-getters who has those parents that are like, hey, no, you need to get out and go do some community service here because this is going to help you later on. But as the big group, they aren't going out.
I have to motivate my sons.
You have to motivate them to take a shower, which is, you'd think, a necessity.
Yep.
I've been to a university before, and I've heard people explain this to me, and it really made sense that you don't get taught anything at university. What happens is you go there and you learn how to find sources, and you basically teach yourself.
Yep.
It's an adult learning environment where you can do absolutely nothing, or you can absolutely fly. And if you choose to fly, at the end of the day, you are still the one that chose to follow up those questions, go and seek that information, do the research, create a thesis. So we're seeing that bell curve of why you actually at university. Is it the endless summer? Is it to escape the real world? So
that's why I think this Von Borry just never left university. I think he should go in his own study. Because let's face it, how much brain power did it take to come up with that? And then to say we should be more like them, it's not even to study it, to figure out how to boost productivity. Crazy.
We've got the I'll say the word, we've got the fattest people in the most abject poverty in the history of the world. When you have the option that you can do absolutely nothing, and all it's going to do is shorten your life, potentially, then people go, I'm kind of fine with that. That matches up with it's not my fault. I'm a victim.
Yep.
I was born this way mentality.
Nothing's anybody's fault anymore.
Exactly. And now we're going to have lazy people saying, I'm saving the planet. You're the problem for going out and working. You're using too much energy.
That's why I eat cows. to keep the methane levels down.
Yeah, exactly. And 'cause they're
Gobsmacked. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Gobsmacked on that subject.
Yeah, isn't it? I was when I saw it. I thought this can't be real, but it is actually real.
Tell us what you think down below in comments. Are you going to university? Are you about to go to university? What's your expectations of university when you have people like that telling you what you can't do, what you can't do, who you should follow, what you can and can't say?
Yep.
And what sort of bar are they setting for you?
Exactly. And do you think we're all environmental terrorists by refusing to be lazy? Have we got it wrong? You might think that.
May God have mercy on your soul.
Would we all agree, as 3 retired members, which basically makes us very qualified for what for the subject that Lauren just spoke about?
Yep.
There
We
is
could
no
be
gift.
lazy, but we're not.
There is no gift in idleness.
Right.
You know.
Well, we're here doing something we don't have to be productive.
That's right. Yeah.
That thought process of retirement, then you take it easy. I'll tell you now, you're never going to retire, but you don't work just for resources. You work for mental resilience,
Exactly.
friendships, comrades, and to keep your stories continually going.
Exactly. To contribute.
To contribute. What do you reckon, Ed? What do you got to say? Have you got another story, bro?
Oh, do I got a topic?
Yeah.
Or story?
Topic.
Oh, is it my turn for topic?
Yeah, let's segue over to Ed.
Okay. Well, before I do, I'm going to have something different. I'm going to add in what I call my Instagram shout out of the day. And I'd like to throw an Instagram shout out to Kim Breed 1911. That's his Instagram name. Kim Breed 1911. He makes Breed knives. And when I say he makes knives, I'm talking like hammer and anvil. And he was kind enough to make me this Damascus sheath knife right there, made out of Damascus. He made the sheath as well. So shout out to Kim Breed. Good guy, retired Special Forces guy making knives.
You're playing dirty pool.
Disclaimer though, Kim Breed has nothing to do with, he didn't even know he was getting that shout out today, but he has nothing to do with the subject that I'm bringing up today. Since this is No Safe Space episode 2, the subjects that we bring up here tend to be a little controversial sometimes.
Exactly. They're our own, same as our opinions.
And along those lines, I want to make sure that folks don't just take my subject maybe and run off with it in one direction that you can run off with it if you choose, but maybe just listen to the subject for a moment and understand the frustration behind. So my subject.
Got me intrigued here.
Yeah, I'm all ears.
Do we need a drum roll?
Here we go. What we're not hearing about. Now think about what we are hearing about. Now let's talk about what we're not hearing about. Why aren't we hearing about it? Chicago, we just finished up the year 2020. Chicago, 769 murders in Chicago for 2020. That's 55% increase from the year before. There was a 53% increase in fatal shootings in 2020. 50 of those fatal shootings were in December alone. 50. 78% of the gun violence was against blacks. Those 78% of those gun fatalities was against blacks. Why don't we hear those names on the news?
You're fucking white! You're fucking white! You're fucking white!
Yep.
Black Lives Matter, to me, Black Lives Matter means all Black lives matter.
Yep.
Not the chosen few that fit the narratives of a few that want to push and push and push a narrative. Not that it's an inappropriate subject, but that I think that there's a small group within the big group that is pushing a narrative that is making a larger divide between races by doing so. And May 31st, 18 murders on May 31st, 18.
Just on one day.
But when you watch American Gridiron Football, on the back of a helmet, you'll see one name.
Yep.
But it's one name. And it's not a name from the 769 Chicago murders. It's not one name of the 55% increase. It's not one name of the 78% that were victims of the black victims of that gun violence. And the part that kind of chaps me about it is that we want to act like, well, maybe it was a different time. Maybe like the George Floyd one, the one that really brought out the latest one is, people want to put it on a timeline. George Floyd was murdered or killed on May 25th. So after that, after all the people spreading it on the social media and taking it out of the atmosphere, about how long does that take for it to really be at its apex or to be climbing toward that apex? So May 25th is when George Floyd was killed, but May 29th through June 1st was Chicago's deadliest weekend in over 65 years. So that was, let's say, 5 days after George Floyd. So you would think that would be making that news as like, you see, we told you Black Lives Matter and look at this, but it didn't. Why not? Because it didn't fit the narrative.
Exactly. It couldn't be used for political posturing.
The deadliest weekend in 65 years. The same week of George Floyd, but didn't make headline news. And that's what that's what bothers me a lot about that. 18 murders in 24 hours during that time period. 18 murders in 24 hours.
And they were all folk of color, were they?
It doesn't. That particular weekend didn't break them down by race.
But there would have been.
But it's South Chicago. Not to be. I don't like it when people say you're stereotyping. You're racially profiling.
No, there's a difference.
There's a difference between racially and statistically.
And just fact. Yeah, exactly.
Statistically, 100% of the 9/11 bombers were Islamists.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's nothing racial about it.
I think what we're talking about is the difference between virtue signaling and really caring. Like, to me, I can hear in your voice that you actually really care about wanting to stop this,
Absolutely.
Exactly. Whereas people who just mention that one person's name, what do they really care about? Do they really care about the good guy badge? Look at me. I'm one of these good guys.
Yeah, because it fits the narrative and it gives, and then
have I frozen up at a very awkward?
Yes.
But and it also gives that very small number.
Yeah.
I think Lauren just seen herself, but it gives that very small chance that number to go and loot, and have a reason behind it. And whereas normally you would think your peers would come along and be like, "Hey man, come on man, that ain't right here. Don't be doing that. That's wrong. You're hitting a man while he's down," kind of thing. And the other thing for 2020, 79 officers were shot in 2020 in the same Chicago report. 79, as opposed to 22 the previous year.
It's this war on police. It's disgusting. Also, trying to wrap compassion around let's take some Nikes, let's do this, and let's commit crimes. I always think David Dawn, the retired police officer that was murdered while trying to, black police officer, retired police officer, who was the highest achieving member of multi-levels of generations of his family. And he lost his life protecting someone else's property from the black looters, and they killed him. And they were said, that doesn't matter. He was sort of on the wrong side because he was former cop. Look, one of the things I really like is seeing that when people have done experiments now and gone out with signs where blue lives matter, black lives matter, the only people that seem to get really butthurt and support Black Lives Matter are white.
You're goddamn right.
Yep, good point.
And it's like in Australia, the white 1,000,000% Aboriginal white lawyer lives in mansions, having been in Africa, having named my daughter after a little girl that I looked after or tried to look after in Africa, whose name was Bernadette, lovely little girl. I care about everyone, and I seem to care more as I get older, you know. But if you're going to address the problems, then you need to have a solution, and you need to address the fact that if Black Lives Matter, how come no one's talking about what's happening in Nigeria and some of the other countries with Boko Haram, who are now carrying out a genocide on other Black Christians? You know, and all these things happening. How come our military is not going for the oil? It's going to places that are right. I'm more than happy would have stuck my hand up and said, let's go to a place not like similar to Rwanda, and let's go in there and be the savior for those who can't defend themselves. That's what a soldier's meant to do, a sheepdog, a crusader is meant to do. I would be willing to die to know that I'm bringing peace and happiness to children and to families more than I would for expansion, resources, or political outreach. So
that's an interesting point, saying that you want to be a savior, because nowadays, if a white person wants to go overseas and share some of their abundant resources that we have supposedly from our privilege, you will get accused of having white savior complex. So we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. If we don't, we're racist and we don't care. If we do, oh, we're just using folk for this white savior complex.
Yeah.
It's funny because, you know, when I was in Haiti, walking around the streets of Port-au-Prince, you know, we're there for one thing, but just like Dean, what you said, the little black girl in Rwanda, every soldier that's got their feet in the mud, that's walking on the line, has those stories about that kid, or could name a couple kids. I had a kid named Pee-wee from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and Pee-wee would follow me from we would rotate between different locations. We'd be at the presidential palace, we'd be at an airfield and a light industrial compound. We would rotate. Pee-wee literally followed me between those three locations. He would be there waiting on me. And the first night I met Pee-wee, he was asleep on top of a wall next to my shoulder. He was sleeping underneath a light. And he had tugged on me and said, "Here." And he handed me two flip-flops or two sandals that were both for the left feet. One was bigger than the other.
Aww.
And he said, "Put these in your pocket." Okay. And I just took them, set them down. And he's like, "No, put those in your pocket." I'm like, "Well, why do you want them in my pocket?" He said, "So no one will steal my shoes."
Oh, bless
I had to put
him.
his shoes in my pocket. Then he curled up next to me to go to sleep.
Oh, bless him. Yeah, I mean, the kids there eat dirt biscuits.
Yeah, that's right.
They eat worse than that in Haiti.
Yeah.
In Haiti, they would literally go to the holes in the street where the manholes are, and there's a stick with a rope, and they would have a bucket on there, and they would wind it up, and they would take the black water from underneath the streets to drink.
Oh.
And
their lives matter. Their lives do matter.
Yeah. I would love to see the Black Lives Matter, who just got ear-billed to have $10 billion in that bullshit 5,000-page report the Democrats tried to push through that got told no. They were giving $10 billion to Black Lives Matter, which in turn goes to the Democrat Party.
Yeah, because they could solve a lot of problems with that money.
Haiti, look at Port-au-Prince after the earthquake they had, devastated.
I want to see 10,000. You've got so many of those Democrat states. I'd like to see 10,000 African-American people who go into those black worst neighborhoods, Atlanta and Chicago, and go down in there and say no more. You know,
and I think there's a lot of them that would love to. Yeah. And why are they not being empowered by the Black Lives Matter to mobilize and go do that?
Yeah, it is. There is a real black on black problem.
Yep.
But everyone can help the black and black problem, help get out of it, you know. And money is never going to be the solution.
No, exactly. And I would challenge anyone who would say we're not allowed to talk about this because we're white. They could just get stuffed, because it's our world too, and we live in it. And just because we're white doesn't mean we don't care and have a heart for children who are of a different color than us, or women, or even the men who are imprisoned at these huge rates. We have a heart for them. It's our world. It's our streets. We are allowed to talk about it, and by God, we will.
Agreed. And
Well,
on that
let's-
note, sorry to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off. We missed a 2-minute warning there. So I just want to
Oh.
wrap this up because we're under a minute. I would
Good
like to
topic.
thank everybody for tuning in today to No Safe Space. Make sure you get in those comments below. Let us know what you thought today. Thank you, Miss Lauren, for coming in here. Thank you, Mr. Dean, for hosting. But make sure you get in those comments. Let us hear maybe a topic you want to hear. Let's hear why you should be the fourth person in here on the panel of No Safe Space. And let's hear from you. Tune in next time for episode 3 of No Safe Space. And Dean, thanks for having us all here today. It was my pleasure.
Vote Team Kaz, and I'm saying go to Mr. P, Mr. Patterson. What do you got to say? All the best. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones that make a better life.
This is
So
the part
let's
that
start
needs
giving.
edited really bad.
Yeah.
You retired too?
Not me. I'm in my prime.